We have another episode of the Next Fix podcast where we're highlighting and hearing about people's comeback stories because that's what we all want to hear, right? Success stories are cool and all, but it's the comeback. It's the rock bottom recovery that we really enjoy hearing about. Today we've got Matt Grace and this is going to be a heck of a conversation. He is the author of the book God Doesn't Relapse. So right away, I had all these questions like, God doesn't relapse? And the subtitle of that is Sex, Drugs, and a Life That Almost Killed Him. But there's a lot more to it than that, even by our brief discussion before we hit record. So first of all, though, man, I want to know how you're living, man. Where are you hailing from?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to get to speak about recovery. So I live in Birmingham, Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, people don't get into this line of work, if you want to call it that, or have the motivation or desire to write a book like you have written, right? Without some type of a comeback story. And that's what we want to hear about. We want to hear about the darkest moments, I guess. What was the genesis of you wanting to help people in recovery? Where did it all start?
So as I mentioned, I was expelled from 2 preschools. So life started off real well for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my behavioral problems got worse. And so even before I picked up a drug, I didn't know how to articulate it when you're a young kid, you don't know about a spiritual malady, right? That's something that you learn and talk about later. But I felt something was broken internally, even from a young age.
Right.
And so my childhood was dark. I was in trouble all the time. By the time I was 9, the school therapist told my parents that she thought I would end up to be a criminal and end up in prison.
Right.
And I was sent to a therapist who gave me a horrible diagnosis and on and on and on. But I first started doing drugs. My best friend, who passed away, unfortunately, from the disease of addiction, he crushed a pill of Ritalin and said, "Grace, get over here and snort this."
This
And
is
that
the first time ever. And so how old were you at this
I was
point?
6.
16, right? You said that. Okay. 16. And you're snorting Ritalin.
And I can remember I didn't even think twice. He just said, "Come over here." It was in the summertime at a friend's house. And the minute that I snorted that, I felt like it was a gift from the gods.
Okay.
And I
Right.
wanted and what happened is when you snort something, that was my first experience with drugs and alcohol, was crushing and snorting something. So I felt like it kind of expedited, and I just knew that I loved and
Right. And I gotta be honest, man, I like as much drugs and partying that I have done, you can see when something clicks or like kind of hits a person a little bit harder than the rest of the people. Like you could tell they're having a much better time than everybody else. And so this happened at 16. Like your eyes most likely just lit up, right? And you're like, oh yeah, there's nothing better than this. I'm gonna do this all the time. Is that kind of what's going on?
100%. I said, "If I could bottle this feeling and feel this way for the rest of my life, then this is exactly what I was looking for."
Wow.
And 2 years later, I became a full-blown crystal meth addict.
Right. Yeah.
And so it went really quickly. My disease shot out of the gun quickly. And when crystal meth just actually ravaged me, and I had to basically call my mom from school. I was out in Santa Barbara, California, where it was introduced to me. And in 6 short months, did not go to one class. I racked up a $10,000 credit card bill, and my father came out to admonish me. And he didn't, we'll get to my dad, but he really wore rose colored glasses. He didn't want to accept my addiction and wanted to sweep it under the rug. But I called my mom and I said, "If you don't fly out here tomorrow and pick me up, I'm going to die."
Yeah.
And because I had a psychotic break.
So
And,
was that now, do you feel like that was a cry for help or were you just trying to perpetuate your lifestyle?
the meth hit me so hard that I just, with the psychosis and, the credit card debt and taking cash advances, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And had I not moved back to Michigan from California, I believe I would have been dead, because, and then in 1995, crystal meth really wasn't a big thing in Michigan.
Okay. But you said in your book, you start with a phrase and man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. You say that the first person you did drugs with is dead and the last person that you did drugs with is dead. And then the question was, why am I still here?
hmm
Like, tell me a little bit more about that, man. I mean, what a phrase, man. That's wild.
So it is surreal. So many of my childhood friends are dead, and I'm very raw and honest. My memoir is brutally honest and raw, but it just has to be that way because I was not a nice kid. I was actually the least likable guy out of all of my friend group. And
Right,
so I'm thinking to myself, the first guy I did drugs with, the best friend I'll ever have is dead. The last guy died from a fentanyl overdose. They actually found him face down in a pool of his own blood. And so I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? Right? Because a lot of times, as I'm starting this process, I have survivor's guilt, and I think to myself, if I write this book, really, who am I to gain recognition for anything? Right? I'm just I struggle with that. So I believe that I am here to I was spared to be of service with every fiber of my being, and I know that you can relate to that, and other people can relate to, what is my purpose on this planet? And I believe that it's to be of maximum service to God and to help people whenever I can, specifically men who are less fortunate than I am.
now when you say less fortunate, how do you mean?
Well, I grew up in privilege, so I'm sure you've heard the saying. I grew up on third base
Okay,
with a silver spoon.
sure.
And I felt like the world owed me something, and I felt entitled and I was spoiled. And when I hit rock bottom and it was suggested to me that I start giving back, and I started to cross the other side of 8 Mile, right? Because that's right. 8 Mile is a dividing line basically between people of means and poverty. And so when I started to do service work and volunteer work, and I saw how that people were living paycheck to paycheck, and it was easier for me to get sober with a family who's supporting me than someone who has nobody, right?
Right.
Felon, no money, no support, no insurance. And that opened my mind and my heart to really see what the rest of the world looks like.
Yeah. Now that what a way to describe your enlightenment. Um, but I want to touch on a little bit about because as I started to read your book, there you open up with a pretty wild story. You want to tell us a little bit about that because it's
Well, my
like
co-author, I had a great co-author who I collaborated with for 6 months because my story was raw and I needed help kind of putting it all together.
sure,
So I was a TV reporter for ABC for a small affiliate in Victoria, Texas, and at that time I had just discovered OxyContin, and so I had this mixture of Adderall, oxys, and vodka,
wow, yeah,
and I used those three substances in unison. And one day I showed up to work at 7:30 in the morning. Think I had taken 100 milligrams of oxy, probably a couple 100 milligrams of Adderall, and a half pint of vodka. I showed
yeah,
up to work at 7:30 in the morning. I started vomiting. I stumbled into my boss's office. I laid down on his couch and he said, "What the hell are you doing?"
right.
Right? And I got up and I mumbled and then I collapsed. I stopped breathing, and by the grace of God, with the acute alcohol poisoning that I had, I started vomiting.
So it
And
was
I think
kind of
that just
it
saved
was
my
like
life.
expelling all of the drugs so that it wasn't truly in your blood system yet. It was like, yeah,
Well, I think I was saturated for I mean, it had to have been one of the 3 things that I think I felt my breathing capacity collapsed,
yeah,
and I I fell down in front of my coworkers, and then I started vomiting, and I threw up on my boss, believe it or not, on his shoes, and they picked me up from my legs and from my shoulders and then dragged me outside so I didn't get any more vomit on any of the equipment in the newsroom.
oh my gosh, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like and there's no shortage of those stories throughout the remainder of the book,
No.
right? Like,
Nope,
yeah,
I showed up to every job that I had, my father got for me. So that's one of the themes of my book is how I was protected and enabled by my father.
yeah,
So I didn't even need a resume. My father would just call companies and get me jobs.
wow, yeah,
And because it's very difficult to become an on-air news reporter. But because my father was in that line of business, he called a friend of his and they just said, "Okay, we'll give him a job in Texas." Right? Not that's it. I didn't deserve the job. I didn't earn the job. I wasn't grateful for the job. And I walked through life with this entitlement and really just a bad attitude. So I say I needed a rude awakening before I had a spiritual awakening.
Right.
So unfortunately, there were
Yeah.
a lot of
What did
jobs
that
where I
look?
would show up, I would be drinking on the job. One of my employers would say, "What's in your orange juice bottle?" And I would say, "Don't worry about it." So,
Yeah.
yeah, I was really not someone who you root for in the
Sure.
book, but the transformation does take place.
So when did that start to happen? Like when did you, to kind of use what you were speaking about, when did you start to cross over the 8 Mile bridge of your journey, right?
So, everybody in my family tried to intervene on my father because he was paying all my bills and, sweeping my addiction under the rug. Towards the end, I was living with my mom at 29 years old, living in her basement, setting the world on fire,
Right.
not doing well. And she had one rule, which was actually a couple rules: no drugs in the house, no alcohol. And if you're not going to show up, please call. So I disappeared on a 3-day crack and alcohol binge.
Wow.
I walked inside Saturday morning at 11:30. My mom said, "Oh my God," and then started sobbing. She then collected herself and said, "If you're going to die, it's not going to be in this house. Get out. I'm changing the locks."
Wow.
That was on October 2nd, 2004. She said, "I will let you stay on one condition, that you go to a meeting," and which I didn't want to do.
Sure.
But I went to a meeting, and it was a men's group. And, I had been in and out of treatment, right? The whole in and out of arrests, drug court, probation, treatment centers. And so I had been exposed to a lot of, hey, have you tried getting on your knees and praying? And growing up as a Jewish person, I would say, well, you don't tell me how to pray. I tell you how to pray. Right.
Talk about entitlement. Yeah, the whole shebang, man. You're like,
But and you can see the arrogance and the dangerous, I had a lot of those old ideas. And so finally I was just so desperate and broken, and I wanted to die, and I thought about killing myself. And I came home after that meeting and got on my knees for the first time and said, "God, if you don't show yourself, I'm gonna blow my head off." And I had a rifle sitting next to me. And
you're even bossing around God.
I gave him terms. But I believe, so I had a white light spiritual experience that lasted 30 minutes. I felt that the obsession to use was lifted from me instantaneously, similar to Bill Wilson.
Yeah.
But, and yeah, it was the most incredible experience. It was more powerful than any crack pipe or any hit of meth that I had ever taken by tenfold.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you throw a Hail Mary. You're like, look, and you got the rifle right next to you. You're ready to do this thing. And so God intervened. So what
100%.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
what did the following, I don't know, several hours after that look like? I mean, was it apologetic? I mean, how did you start piecing it together?
So, right, the two things that I'm most passionate about are service and God. And so I had that profound experience. And then I found the right mentor who really challenged me to be of service. And, I say that I needed to fire the yes men in my life, including myself. And I had to surround myself with men who were going to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. Right. I
Wow.
think that after being sober for 21 years, something has shifted. As you know, as alcoholics, we're hypersensitive, and you have to kind of be in a position of pain to receive a message of, you really need to start giving back. And the combination of a routine of prayer, but also a routine of service, is really what bolstered the foundation of my recovery.
Yeah. So what does that service look like for you? I mean, or has it changed, or where are you really focusing your efforts?
So there's a couple things. I know that this country has become more secular. So one of the goals in my book is, I know that there are atheists and agnostics who struggle with the concept of intertwining a higher power into their recovery. And so one of the things I say is that service can be your higher power. You don't have to believe in God to make a pot of coffee, which is one of my mentors said, right? You don't need a spiritual experience to go open a meeting, or to drive someone to a meeting, or to go volunteer at a soup kitchen.
Right.
And
Right.
so it takes a certain amount of humility to be able to receive that message and then to want to instill that into my life. And so I basically incorporated, in the first year was all about service and prayer. I really didn't have that much else going on because I was just, drugs and alcohol had just destroyed everything in my life as a low bottom. If you're smoking crack and, finding prostitutes in the street at 10:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
your life is in the toilet.
Right. So when you committed to this service, are you talking about meetings
It
specifically
started
or
with meetings, but then it shifted to treatment centers. That's when my life really changed. That is because, as I said, I feel everything in my life has been given to me, right? I guess I've earned some things, but for the most part, I was born into a family that had means. And when I started volunteering at treatment centers, state-funded treatment centers, for that men come who don't have insurance, they have, face tattoos, neck tattoos. These guys have been raked over the coals of life.
yeah.
That gave me a fresh perspective of how truly blessed my life is.
Tell me a little bit about the name of your book, right?
Mhm.
God Doesn't Relapse. So I have so many questions. How do you mean God doesn't relapse? I want to know.
So there's two things. One, I spent 10,000 hours working in a private consulting practice, helping high net worth families who are struggling with addiction and related to addicts and alcoholics, enabling all the stuff that I kind of grew up with. And in the treatment center industry, over the years, they've come out with more and more external solutions vis-a-vis antabuse, Vivitrol, right, Suboxone, now Sublocade, methadone, right? There's all these.
Naltrexone. Did you say naltrexone?
Yeah, no, I didn't, but yes, naltrexone.
Yeah.
Listen, if someone needs help and they come to me and they're on Suboxone, I don't turn anybody away ever. With that being said, I believe in dialectical behavioral therapy, CBT, EMDR, right? We could go through all the modalities. And I believe in a lot of that. And I am a firm believer in therapy because my business partner was an EMDR therapist. However, there is going to come a time in someone's life when I believe that the only thing standing between them and a drink or a drug is the power of God. Because what I say is that treatment centers close, therapists retire, but God is always open for business.
Right. Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, and so I don't know if you've seen it lately, but nitrous has made a comeback. And I just did something on social media that if Suboxone is so great, why are people huffing nitrous? Right? There's still that internal discomfort, and people are huffing it to the point where they're losing control in their lower extremities. And so the whole concept of a higher power is really for me twofold. One, uh, you know, antabuse is not going to save your life. And if you look at, I'm a big believer in antidepressants, right? I think if someone is struggling with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, I think it has its place, right? It's not for me to tell someone to not take that, but what I say is that medication helps your mind, but God touches your soul.
Yeah, and that kind of rings true for me because I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I was diagnosed with bipolar. And in the defense of all of the people who had diagnosed me with these conditions or illnesses, like I was lit. I was so, I was drowned in alcohol and I was peppered with all kinds of drugs. My ability to communicate or articulate what was truly going on, it didn't exist. And so I look back and I know that there was this battle externally going on where everybody's trying to give me these solutions for what they could observe or what they thought was going on with me. And at the end of the day, I agree with you. It was really just a conversation between God and myself. And I think that that conversation holistically, it involves like elements of you talking to yourself, right? That decision to stop. And there's all kinds of different ways to approach that, right? Like I'm putting it probably rather poorly, right? But the idea is that the external efforts of all these doctors and all these medications, right? All of this was going on. Meanwhile, what truly had to happen was my dedication and surrender. And then once I had done that and started really forging a relationship with God, that's when things started to really, I truly gained traction in recovery because of that, right?
Mhm.
So it's an uphill battle, brother, for sure, right? But man, so gosh, like you're a complete heathen, right? You are just like this monster of a privileged drug addict maniac, and then you're actually running a facility, right, to help people.
No, 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 I had a private consulting practice.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
Yeah, so
butchered
we
that.
did, recovery mentoring and therapy, but we did it, from basically sitting in other people's living rooms across the
Sure.
country.
Okay, my bad.
Yep.
My fault for that. However, it was the work was still, the same essentially, right? You're trying to help people that were in the place that you were at. And so tell me how the book like really like what was the genesis of the book? Like when did you realize that this is what you needed to do?
Yeah, I had to make a decision how honest and open I was gonna be with my story. So one of the things that I say is that, I want and I use my own family as the number one lesson of what not to do. But one of the things I say about my father is I say, this book is not an indictment of his failure. It's a testament to what happens when you love someone too much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
because he was the
now
number one enabler for you.
he paid people to do my homework in high school and in college. I almost killed someone on the expressway. I threw something out of a school bus on a field trip, and he paid the woman $25,000 not to press charges. He paid the police not to arrest me. He, you know, gave me when my friends were having internships and working on building their careers in their late teens and early 20s. I was playing golf with my father's friends at the club, and he did the best that he could, but it was such a toxic relationship. And as I mentioned, also, he introduced me to strippers and prostitution, which is also something I talk about. The subtitle, Sex, Drugs, and the Life That Almost Killed Me. That
Yeah.
also sent me down a simultaneously dark path, not just with drugs and alcohol, but with sex. And so my book is half memoir, half case study. So in between each chapter, there's an interlude that's italicized, and it talks about some of the case studies that are successful and some that aren't. So it's kind of a workbook
Wow.
for families to say, okay, this guy has 10,000 hours with some pretty high profile families of experience. This is what worked and this is what didn't. And there's a common theme that, you know, the worst thing that parents can do, and one of the worst things that my father did for me, was to destroy my ambition.
Wow.
That is, you don't have to be an addict to have your parents destroy your ambition.
I did not see that coming. And now that you've said it, so that was the number one thing that really put you behind was destroying your ambition.
I mean, yeah, because if he's paying all my bills and I'm living the country club life, I was 17, 18 years old living like a 55-year-old man.
A well-to-do 55-year-old man,
Yes.
a 55-year-old man that did well in life, right? You're like, that's wow.
And so one of the things that I'm trying to reach fathers is that, and I mentioned to you before we started, is that my dad was not my father, he was my best friend. And so I'm asking parents to have your kids earn things. It's okay to make things difficult for them.
Yeah.
You don't have to be your kid's best friend. That can come in an adult life, right? But kids need structure and kids need discipline and kids need boundaries. I had none of those, and I has still haunted me to this day.
Now, you mentioned the case studies about what worked and what didn't work, and from what I could gather from your story is that your dad was doing everything that you're not supposed to do by
Mhm.
enabling you and giving you the green light and all that. However, it seemed like your mom had a pretty good approach, right? Like she had rules, and she said if you break them, you're donezo, right? Like, and she stuck up for it, right? In the midst of maybe your father being your best friend and that not being the right move, how was your mother's role? Was she trying to do the right thing the whole time?
She was. Unfortunately, when my parents got divorced, one of the worst decisions that I made or that they made was that I lived with my father. And
Okay.
my house became, I mean, I had kids were coming over all times of the day during high school to get drunk and high during school hours. So
Right.
the place was a flop house.
Yeah.
So I didn't really stand a chance. And my mom, she tried to, she tried to draw a line in the sand and hold that line. And
Yeah.
eventually she did when she threatened to throw me out. And my dad actually did finally pull back the reins of the financial enabling.
Sure.
And because they came together as one unified message, then I had a chance to recover.
Wow, man. What after your experience with God, you put the shotgun away or the rifle away. What did your faith look like after that? I mean,
So, how I came up with the title is when I was 16 years sober, I became extremely ill from COVID.
okay.
I got so ill that I almost lost the ability to walk, and it triggered something called fibromyalgia. And I was immunocompromised before COVID, but after getting sick, I became so ill and I had so much pain that I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I mean, I was bedridden for months. I couldn't golf, I couldn't travel, I couldn't date. Everything was stripped of me. So I came up with the title God Doesn't Relapse because there, I thought that I would be, oh, I'll just be sick when I'm older. Well, what happens when you face a chronic illness when you're a young man? And so I include extraordinary stories of other people's sobriety, right? This book is not just about Matt Grace. This book is about people who I admire and who have tremendous faith and character. And I look at their stories kind of like mine, that what happens when you can't go to a meeting, right? When you hear people say nature's my higher power or yoga's my higher, right? There's multiple pathways to a higher power. But what happens when you're chronically ill and you can't leave your house?
Yeah.
So I drew a line in the sand. I said, I'm either going to kill myself because the pain was so severe and I didn't want to take opiates.
Right.
Luckily, I found a medication that works. But I said to myself, what kind of example am I going to be for newcomers if I take my own life because of something that's, so challenging? And what I said to myself is that I doubled down on my faith in God. And I said, I want to demonstrate to God that how serious I am about my faith is that I'm doubling down, that I'm all in, even with sickness, right? And so when I made that decision, just I got through it. And so I just want people to know that if you're facing some kind of, like my friend, his son was murdered, brutally murdered. He had 6 years. He didn't go back out. One of my friends had to bury his son and his wife in the same year, right? Think about that kind of catastrophe. And he didn't go back out. Terminal cancer, financial ruin, divorce, right? All of these things that can hit you even when you have long-term sobriety. I'm the people who believe in something and have some kind of faith and some kind of prayer life fare much better than the people that don't.
It's interesting you say that because I have said it out loud that, from a pragmatic standpoint, right? From a pragmatic approach, like if you do some of the things outlined in the Bible, right? If you just do them and maybe you don't want to attach the titles or the names to any of it, it still is a great practice. Much of it is a great practice. It is a good way to live. And right. So the higher power element of things, when you get out of your own head and you realize that you are not the center of the universe, this is to me what I think is the point, right? Like when you stop thinking that everything is about you,
Hmm.
and this kind of it lends to your acts of service and your life of service. When you are being of service to another human, it gets you out of your own head. And so, both of these approaches, praying gets you out of your own head and you thinking that maybe you're the center of the universe. You realize that no, there is something bigger and greater than yourself. And when you do that, there's something powerful that happens. And then also when you're helping others and when you're in the moment and you're caring about somebody else and you're doing something for them, not for yourself, for the right reasons too, right? Like not for bragging rights and not for you weren't court ordered to be there, but when you're performing a service for another human, you're outside of your own head and you're not able to just kind of self wallow and be as self centered as we all get, right? And you're outside of that element of of all of our egos. You're outside of that. And you're helping somebody else. It helps. It really helps with your own conditions. And that's what I try to tell people. I'm like, the whole higher power thing. And then somebody like, oh, well, I don't need God and I don't want God to be a part of it. And it's like, to your point, like, well, can you still make a pot of coffee? And it's still that, right? It's like performing something and doing something outside of yourself. It just it gets us in our minds um, to operate differently. And a lot of times that can really shake things up and people can find some success in that, just participating in something, not selfishly, right?
Yeah.
So what do things look like for you now? Like, so you've written the book, like, I love, man, I'm like, hadn't gotten too far in the book, obviously, but this thing is packed with like all kinds of stories and references to things that are like, I mean, I was reading the beginning of it and I was like, whoa, like and I started doing that today, right? Like, and so, with your book, right? Like, what are you talking about it? I mean, what's the plan?
So right now I'm doing something called the National Sobriety Tour. And so I am speaking across the country at churches, synagogues, and nonprofit organizations, treatment centers for free. And basically talking about the three things that I'm most passionate about is to try to help families break away from enabling and how to recover together as one whole unit.
Yeah,
I demonstrate there's one family in particular that has been gracious enough to write me a testimonial, and I talk about their case openly with their real names. And so they're kind of like the gold standard of family recovery.
sure.
Here's a man who went to Wharton and Harvard, who's got 4 homes and flies on a private jet, who he and his wife had the humility to enter into family therapy and realize that they didn't know how to communicate with their son and vice versa, and they learned how to come together as one family. And it's an incredible scenario now.
Sure.
So I'm talking about, I'm trying to reach families. I'm trying to reach atheists and agnostics, or people who struggle with the concept of God.
Is that the third thing? Is that the third thing?
That I think that's, well, yeah, they're intertwined. Is service and God.
Sure, sure, sure.
But because there's so many people who maybe they don't like AA, or they go to SMART, or they go to Dharma recovery, whatever it is, I'm so passionate about. And I've seen people's disposition and mental affect change so dramatically in the positive way from doing service.
Right, right.
And there's a young man who I reference who is severely bipolar and was a chronic relapser. And I said to his sponsor, I said, why don't you get him some service positions and see if that helps? So he's had 2 service positions for 5 years, every Tuesday night and every Sunday night. He's been sober for 5 years.
Wow.
But what's interesting is that his disposition changed. So that blunt affect that you often see with someone who is experiencing the lows of bipolar disorder, he's more jovial and more amicable and has come out of himself. And I think that's what the power of trying to help someone else can do, even with someone suffering from mental illness. I mean, I have all this lived experience that I want to share with people, that if you're depressed, and like, for instance, when I was 14 years sober, I thought that my financial situation changed for the better. And I thought that if I went out and I bought a Porsche, I bought my dream car, I bought a home, I joined a country club, I bought a Rolex, and I started traveling everywhere. And within 8 months, I sold the car, because all these things that I thought that society told me are going to make me happy and make me feel like a man, I felt just as empty on the inside as I did from when I first got sober. My dad had passed away, and I tried to buy my way to happiness and to demonstrate to my peers, look at me, look how successful I am. But in the end, when I recommitted to service, and when I started associating and going back to the roots of what really bolstered my recovery, I found that it strengthened my relationship with God.
So you're 14 years sober, right? And so the sobriety thing, it was still there, it still held true. However, some things changed in your life and you're like, oh, well, now this is what I do, right? This is the next logical step. I've got to buy these things. This is what I'm supposed to do. And things got worse for you. Is that what
I
happened?
was still empty on
Yeah.
the inside. I was running from losing my father was difficult. right? Because like I said, he was my best friend and he did live to see me get 11 years of sobriety.
That's
And
awesome.
so, I think that we're kind of conditioned to say that if I just have, my mentor said it best. He said, there's nothing wrong with liking nice things as long as I own them and they don't own me.
Mm,
And what
right.
happened is that all this material stuff that I accumulated owned me. And I still had an emptiness internally. And because I had turned my back on service and I started, trying to plug into what I thought would make me happy, it had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
And I'm not anti Porsche, right?
Sure.
I'm
Right.
not anti Rolex, but
Right.
I'm gonna say that if you're an alcoholic and you think that those things are gonna fulfill you, I'm telling you, you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, man. It's such a tough lesson. It's a tough pill to swallow, certainly. And so it's so impressive that you've kind of figured things out and kind of stepped away and then it kind of reestablished or solidified the first lesson and you came back to it. And so with this tour, how does that look, man? You're going
So
around.
if anyone's listening and they want me to come speak, they can go to mattgrace.com
Okay.
and there's a drop down box called the National Sobriety Tour, and they can fill in their information. And so I'll get the email and then I can set something up to come and talk. I'm speaking
I love it.
May at a church at the the Collegiate Marble Church in New York City. Then I'm speaking
Okay.
at a treatment center. I'm speaking in Jersey. So I'm willing to speak, and I'm also donating books as well to centers that may not have, they have men and women who are struggling to find insurance
Right.
and so I feel that I have a responsibility, and I've been given a gift. And so that's what this national sobriety tour is about. I'm hoping to inspire service among other people because, as you know, I think addicts are failing each other. So what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
When I go speak at a treatment center, I think there's a lack of commitment from the person with the wristband, and I think there's a lack of commitment with someone with 15 years.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends stopped coming around and stopped giving back, and I'm trying to inspire others to, they've got the job and the wife and the family and all the blessings. I think a lot of people forgot where they came from,
Sure.
and it's easy to just enjoy the fruits of your lifestyle. And I'm just trying. I think that there's nothing more powerful than one human being helping someone else. I don't think AI can ever replace that. And men need mentors. And one of the things that I say is that charities need checks, but men need mentors. Right?
Love
There's
that, man.
something more powerful than um, checks are needed. But I am most touched when I go to try to help another man who's drowning.
Yeah. Well, man, you've really kicked me into gear because I've been kind of wrestling with the idea of going back to the homeless shelter that I was at for a little bit, and I keep telling myself like, "Oh, I need to go back there and talk to them," and I haven't done it, but now I gotta I'm gonna make that happen. I'm going to make that happen. But what a magnificent thing that you're doing, Matt. So mattgrace.com, this is where people can go, and you're donating the books to treatment centers
Some
and
of them, some. I mean, it's kind of like an ebb and flow. I'm donating, yes, I'm donating books to nonprofits and treatment centers that may, where
yeah.
some of the patients don't have a lot of money.
You know exactly. I've actually my books go out to they go out to a couple places in Vegas that I know they buy my books like not in bulk. When I say bulk, like 20 of them, something like that,
Yeah.
not hundreds or anything, but they put them in there and the patients take them when they leave the facility and I'm just like, wow, it's so cool. And then you're just showing up and telling everybody about your journey and about of course the case studies that you've seen work. I mean, it's an amazing thing that you're doing, brother. And I just love that you're putting it out there. Like, hey, just reach out to me, and then and we'll go over it. And then and I don't doubt for a second that you're not the kind of person that shows up, right? Like
Hmm.
that's an amazing thing, man. It's such a
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
What kind? Give me one nugget before we close out here. Like one nugget. If you were talking maybe to the younger Matt Grace, like that guy, maybe the Matt Grace living in his mom's basement, or maybe you're even the really young Matt Grace that was, having trouble and gosh, when you were back before you even were in school, but a younger version of you that maybe needs to hear something. What would be something that you'd like to share with that guy?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, I was not a nice kid. And so one of the things that I'm passionate about that started even before my addiction was I was a bully. And so what I would say to myself, I'd go back and say to myself is, just be nice. Be nice to you don't know what's going on with that kid. You don't know what's going on with the other kid, and be nice because I can still be pigheaded, and it's one of my character defects that I still struggle with today. So I would still say, well, I should still look in the mirror today. It's the same advice: be nice, because I can
Oh,
be hard
wow.
on people. I can be hard on people. I can be judgmental, very judgmental of maybe people's sobriety or programs. It's just to be nice.
Yeah, man. Hey, yeah. To your point, it's good advice for all of us. I get caught in that loop too because we're humans, and that's why we gotta pray too. Be nice, be kind, and pray that we don't lean into those tough habits that we have. Being judgmental. But man, what an impressive guy you've turned into, my friend. I'm so excited that you're out there doing good work for people in recovery, man. And I'm gonna finish the book, right? Well, everybody, this has been
I just want to
another.
say one thing real quickly.
Yeah, brother.
Please don't quit on the book. It's
Yeah.
because my transformation doesn't take place till the end. And so some people have said, wow, your childhood is hard to read about. So I'm just saying, please don't quit on me. I promise I change.
Oh, wow. Man, now I'm definitely got I mean, like, just the first little bit that I read, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is nuts." And then now yeah, so everybody knows, before we hit record, you were sharing some things that kinda hit me, like, in a tough way. And so I could see that little cautionary statement, I could see where you're coming from. If I could imagine what it might dig into, and it's hard stuff, but that's life, man. Like you said, it had to be that candid. It had to,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that's what I encourage everybody. If you could muster up enough courage to share your story, whatever it may be, it doesn't have to be, gruesome. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be, a good example of how somebody can come back. And that's the whole
Yeah.
point of this thing, man.
Yeah.
You're a comeback story, and I'm blessed to hear about it too and be able to read about it. And we're all very blessed, that you didn't go the other way, man. So, well, anyways, man, thank you so much for your time, brother. I do appreciate it, man. I'm looking forward to this tour that you're gonna do. All right. So,
Ryan, thank you so much for having me. It was a real privilege.
yeah, man.
All
All
right.
right, brother. Keep up the
Okay.
good work. All right, guys, it's been another episode of The Next Fix.